got to go into the Wake Monarch today for the IT stuff that I'm putting together here with an outsourced company.
So where exactly is Wake Monarch geographically?
Geographically, it's in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina. So it's right on Bloodworth Street, which is 5 minutes from downtown. We're in a section of the Open Table church that had a school at one point, and they weren't utilizing it, and they were very happy to let us lease out for them over the next 3 years.
You say it was in Raleigh?
Yep, downtown Raleigh.
So, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So I read that article that you shared with me about the school getting launched. So this is all brand new, just getting started. Why don't you kind of give me more of the inside story on like what's happening right now with the school?
Sure. So we've been working on this now for the board. I've been on the board for about 2 years. This has been being worked on for 4 years now. So we just actually did the ribbon cutting and are opening the school. The school will be opened in August of this year, 2021, based on the Wake County school calendar, the public school calendar. We're going to follow a year-round schedule, which many of the schools do here in North Carolina. And the reason we're doing that is, as we get into what Wake Monarch's all about, there's going to be a lot of students that are going to, hopefully come and stay and get their diplomas. But many times kids are going to be starting mid-year or after they get out of a rehabilitation facility. They may have to leave for a couple of weeks. So we need a more flexible schedule. So the year-round schedule is the way for us to go. It also allows not only our teacher, but we'll have an individual at the school that's focused on recovery and counseling, and that'll allow these kids and parents to be able to get that on a year-round basis, where we don't just say, oh, hey, 2 months of the summer, good luck, we'll see you in a couple months. So this has been going on now for 4 years, getting the organization together, raising funds, all those kinds of things.
That's great. It's like coming right at a time when independent, or let's call it non-traditional education, is becoming traditional or the norm, right? And people are taking advantage of the freedom that's very unique in our country, right? Compulsory education is the law in many places. So you wouldn't even have an opportunity to create something like Wake Monarch, let alone charter schools and other public entities and smaller homeschooling entities and collectives. So I think, I know that what you're doing is great. I want you to kind of tell us your story and how you got involved in Wake Monarch in a second. But, Brian, I think, the work that you're involved in when it comes to giving a resource to people with addiction is what this revolution of being able to educate people in a unique way that's very specific to them and where they're at in their life. Right. It goes to the year-round schedule as well. Right. Like
exactly.
It's all in that theme. Right. So I won't go on very long, but it's very near and dear to me. And I think and on top of the school, you've got me thinking with what you've done, that there's, really within reach other ways to help people that have overcome addiction. They're in recovery, maybe several years out. There's probably ways to help these people level up, right? And that's what education in school is, right? An opportunity to level up. So you've got my wheels turning on how do you help people after school life, right? Get into a situation where they can level up. But why don't I take a back seat? This is an opportunity for you to talk about Wake Monarch and how you got involved. Brian, why don't you go ahead and tell your story about how you got involved in this great organization?
Sure. So first of all, just so everyone that does listen to this, Wake Monarch's a recovery high school, and there's a whole association of recovery high schools throughout the United States. A number of states have been very progressive. The first recovery high school started over 20 years ago out of Houston, Texas. And they now support somewhere in the zone of like 40 to 50 students every year. There's states like Massachusetts that are, a little bit more liberal states that many years ago decided to fund through the state. They have 4 to 5 recovery high schools throughout the state of Massachusetts that are funded by the state of Massachusetts for children that really have struggled with drug addiction. They get through their rehabilitation facilities. This is not a rehab organization. It's to help children that or children where there's a huge gap for recovery help from the ages of 13 up to the ages of 18, 19 from the standpoint. And we'd even go a little higher if a student wanted to get a high school diploma and an equivalent high school diploma within the state they're in. I'm based out of North Carolina, and North Carolina does not have any funds or state help to recovery high schools. There actually was never a recovery high school in North Carolina. The first one did come up in Charlotte and opened 2 years ago as a private institution. And that's what we're doing. We're starting as a private institution.
Brian, what's the name of that other school?
I'm trying to remember, and I apologize. But yeah, we talk to them on a regular basis. Actually, Arch Academy, I think. I'm trying to remember the exact name, but I can get back to you on it. But since we're autonomous, really they had to focus on their children in Charlotte, and we decided to just focus on Raleigh. And over time, the goal is that we can sync up with them and really decide that we want to approach the state of North Carolina for general funds. And for, being able to get that money on a regular basis. How I joined Wake Monarch Academy, I had a tragedy in my life about 4 years ago with my 19-year-old son who was going to Eastern Carolina, ECU. He, was an honor roll student. He was a varsity lacrosse player on and off. He was a skateboarder, basically almost at the point where they was going to be professionally sponsored. He had a lot going for him. Unfortunately, he passed away of a drug overdose with a Molotov cocktail of Xanax and another drug that basically put him to sleep, and he never woke up. And it was not just him, it was him and a friend who was also a varsity football player, athlete, student, good kids. They just got caught up in the wrong situation. And I believe my son it wasn't a one-time thing. I'm not going to lie to myself. He was caught up in the Xanax and benzos and some other things. But he seemed to have it somewhat under control. But let's face facts. Most people that have drug addictions for a long period of time, that they've worked, they're fine, everything's good. They can sort of hide it, but then eventually it creeps on them and they start thinking they are under control, and everyone realizes what's wrong with that guy, right? Long story short, that was the most tragic point in my life, losing my youngest son. As a father of 3 kids and 3 children, I had to make a decision fairly quickly for the remaining 2 children. Am I going to crawl into a hole and be a negative person and let this affect me in a negative way for the rest of my life? Or am I going to figure out a way where I can leverage this, set an example for them, and try to do some things that help other children and parents so they don't have to go through what I've been through? Really, it was very difficult for me. I went through some group counseling. I went through some individual counseling to really think about what I wanted to do. And I spent 2 years after that saying, what do I want to do? And what can I handle that I can do that's not going to put me in a bad place? I started I spoke at the high school here locally, because the Leesville High School in Raleigh at the time, within 2 years, there's 10 kids that were either had suicide or overdoses.
So that's your local public high school.
That's
2
the public
years,
high
10.
school. in
Okay.
2 years, there was 10 kids from what I know that had either supposedly committed suicide or had drug overdoses. And there was also a lot of articles in the paper about kids dying due to the drugs having, other things in them that people don't really think are in them, right? When they buy these drugs.
Fentanyl.
Yeah, fentanyl. A lot of kids were dying around Raleigh, overdosing and taking things, and they figured out it was fentanyl in it.
Brian, can you tell me about the relationship you've built with other parents?
Sure. So, that's a good lead in. I spoke at the school. A lot of parents wanted to meet with me. For me, it was an interesting concept because, all of a sudden I'm an expert on how to parent kids to not have drug overdoses when I'm the one that actually had the kid that had the drug overdose. So I said to myself, why am I the expert? So I sat back and really talked to a lot of other parents about what I would do differently now if my son Caleb was still here. And it's exactly what the doctors tell me I shouldn't have done, right? You shouldn't blame yourself. You shouldn't talk about what you could have done. It's not going to change it. But the reality is, I wanted to be honest with these parents about how I parented and how I was raised. And it was very different in the 70s and the 80s. And I just thought that he was just being a normal kid playing around and experimenting. But to be very upfront, in this day and age, you can't allow that. There's too many prescription drugs, man-made drugs that are available on the dark net, and your kids can get those. They can go into the dark web, they can order them, they'll come to your house within a day or two. And you as a parent are like, how are they getting these things? Well, it's very easily accessible to children. My middle son, who's now 25, at the time was in his early 20s, said, Dad, sit down, I'll show you exactly how you can get this stuff. And within 2 minutes, he showed me I could get anything I wanted, anything on the dark web from a drug perspective.
Give me a little bit more. Can you give me a little bit more detail about some of the things you were sharing with these parents about this is how I was raised, this is what's going on now? That's very interesting.
Yeah. So I was the middle of 3 boys. We were all, we all played sports, but we, definitely were a little wild. I like to, drink, I'm not going to lie, smoke marijuana, do things that were out there, but there really wasn't a lot out there. That was pretty much what was available. Yes, there was cocaine, all those things were there, but there wasn't, Xanax and all these pills that are available now. And for me, it was like, okay, I tell these parents, listen, you're going to catch your kids drinking and smoking, and you're going to, oh, well, that's just what I used to do. Well, don't go there, because that's where my head went. Yeah, they'll be fine. I did all those things in college, and they're going to come out of the chute and they'll be fine. That my son's not going to be that kid that I read about in the paper. I told the parents, when you start sniffing out that they're doing these things, you need to shut it down. And you need to shut it down hard, and you need to be strict about it. And even though you may think that drinking and marijuana aren't a big issue, which honestly still at many times I don't think they are. But if you start seeing them doing those regularly too young, they get dependent, and then they want something else. So my view is you need to be very strict on those kids until they go off at 18, 19 in the college where you lose that control. You still need to be strict, but make them think about this. This could lead to other things. And a lot of kids in this day and age, when I've talked to parents, have there's a lot of depression and anxiety.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
And I don't know where this came from. Maybe it was out there before, but what happens is when you start seeing what happens to a lot of kids that are taking drugs, and I'm throwing out my own stats, but it's almost like 8 out of 10 times it's linked to some sort of depression.
Yeah, it always is. I mean, listen, it's filling a gap. If people are feeling loved, if people are feeling, the possibilities of life, and if they're engaged in a community that's lifting them up, not like everybody, right? There's always going to be parasites in an organism, But as long as that's a healthy social organism where there's a lot more symbiosis than parasitic behavior, people are going to be fine. And I think what you're talking about is the addiction side and the substance abuse side of what is, maybe more of a problem about how we bring kids into the world, fill them up with a different mindset of possibilities rather than different things, right? And let's have honest conversations, right? Let's not avoid those hard conversations. I think what you point out, Brian, is a no-brainer thing. And I'm not trying to de-emphasize or minimize your insight there and the conversations you're having with these parents, but it's kind of a no-brainer, right? Like be on
Well,
top
it's
of
the
these
old
things and
boys
have
will,
yeah.
yeah, boys will be boys that, and brushing it over. And I feel
And tell
like
them what happens when boys
maybe,
are boys and
yeah,
they stop being boys, and what happens when bad boys are bad boys. I mean, there's the concept of, what is your shadow, and that is the darkest version of yourself, right?
yeah.
And if you're not open to the possibility that it could be you that ends up going down that, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person, right? But you can be a bad person. You can make really bad decisions. And we need to have the honest conversations with people just to open them up. And a well-nurtured mind will say, you know what, yeah, that's a path I don't want to go down, right? And if they have a love
And
around them,
yeah. And
yeah.
I think a strict parent, my parents were much stricter in that regards. I will say one thing, and one thing I do want to say here is, one thing that really irks me, there's always on movies and jokes, and people joke about Xanax, like Xanax is no big deal. Oh, I took a Xanax. Oh, go take a Xanax. You need to settle down. Well, the bottom line is this: is if you're prescribed Xanax as an adult and you're taking like 0.25 milligrams, that and you need that to take to get through your day, that's fine. It's prescribed. But if you go look up what a Xanax bar is, which is like 8 to 10 times the strength of what you're prescribed, these kids aren't just taking one of them. They take one, then over time, their body gets used to it. I believe my son probably took 3 or 4 bars, at one time. That's like 15, 20 times what you're prescribed. So, as parents and people joke about these, I know it can be funny, but when something happens to me, and other parents that are dealing with this stuff that's like candy at the high schools here, when my kids were in high school, I don't know if it's still the case, but you could get this stuff like candy at Leesville High or any of the high schools here in Raleigh, and I'm sure it's true at any school. I'm not here to do an infomercial on that, but what I will say is, don't downplay, oh, I've taken those, they're no big deal. Okay, go take 10 of them and see what it does to you. And you'll wake up the next day, you won't even remember what happened. So, but I'll get back on track. Really, I joined Wake Monarch to help other parents and other children, as well as they needed someone at the time to help them as a board. They had asked me for over a year to get on the board. I just wasn't ready mentally to join the group, because when I do something, I either want to do it right or not do it at all. I don't want to join something and then not show up. Bottom line is, I eventually decided to join the board. It'll be 2 years here this fall. What I found is they had all the right people. They had people that were involved in public schools. They had a lot of people involved in recovery. They were associated to a lot of the recovery organizations in Raleigh. The gap is there's not a lot for kids between the ages of like 15 and 18 or 19, where you're sort of in that middle ground. And what I saw is they Wake Monarch had a great group of people on the board, but they didn't have anyone that really was raising funds. And if you want to open a private school, you're going to have a chunk of money to get it going. So with my background in technology sales, I said, I'm going to join this board and help you guys raise funds. And we're going to open the school within 2 years. And we had a goal at the time of $100,000 to raise. As soon as I got close to that, it went to 150. And typical sales raised the quota, so to speak. But the reality is, then Michelle Umstead joined, who who unfortunately also lost a child at 19, a son at 19. And we bonded to say, let's get this going. And she started an annual 5K that raised, I believe, somewhere around $20,000 to $30,000. And then we did a charity golf outing this fall, this last spring, at NC State's campus, the Lonnie Poole Golf Course. We raised over 40K. We've gone out for grants. We've gotten personal people to donate. So now in the bank, the last time I looked, we were up over $200,000, somewhere in the low $200,000 range. So we have the money to open this school. We are going to charge parents. Obviously, this is a private school. Unfortunately, the goal is to start to create some scholarships over time. So it's not just the kids whose parents can afford to pay for them to go to this school, that we can help some of the underprivileged and the kids that really want to go to this that don't have the money. That's another reason we put it in downtown Raleigh. It's very close to the public bus route. So eventually over time, we could not just support people that can afford it, but try to help, the whole community, and then go to the state and see how we can get more money for those types of kids.
So why is the school going to be different, right? Not just that it's built for recovery, right? And giving an environment where, they can be, not easily pulled back into, the wrong situation. I mean, I have a friend who was recently sharing with myself and others about slipping, right? And it was because he was associating with the same people back when he was using. What he ended up doing? Yeah. He ended up using, right? So, and that's what Wake Monarch's providing, right? That environment where hopefully you have a bunch of people that are still in that recovery mode, even though they're out of, out of the recovery setting, right?
Correct.
So what are you going to do different in the classroom? And that's not a trick question. I'm just curious, is there anything different? Because there's an opportunity to expose these kids to different possibilities now that I know that you're aligned with the public school system a little bit, but go ahead.
We're just trying to make sure that we can have, when the children graduate, that they can have an equivalent diploma as if they went to a public school in North Carolina. That's very important to us, because there are, as you mentioned in the beginning, Joe, you're right on the money. There's a ton of homeschooling here in North Carolina now. Be it religious homeschooling or non, but there's two huge homeschooling communities in the North Carolina area, and that's very popular. And just because they get schooled at home doesn't mean they don't get into a good college. And it's the same for our school. What we're going to do different is we really look at it as a community, and we're tied into the recovery community. So not only will we have working with the children at the school, we're going to work very closely with the parents. We're going to have recovery coaches. We're going to have groups that sit down every day to talk about, how they're doing, circle time, so to speak, which is something you do in the recovery community. And I'm going to be very, very upfront. We're going to try to help any child that slips. They have a slip up, they fail a drug test, whatever it may be. But these children do need to want to be there in recovery. It's up to that individual. And if a child continues to slip or cause problems or not want to be there, we're going to move them out. We're going to help the parents and get them try to push them into a recovery facility again. But we're not going to be that recovery facility. We're a recovery high school. Our goal is for kids that want to be there. From a curriculum standpoint, we're going to be using and I'm not here to plug anything, but we're going to be using a software program that's being used by Wake County high schools. So all these, because let's face it, with COVID, the bottom line is, who knows, in 2 months, we could all have to go back and work out of the homes again. And that's very difficult. So we're going to follow whatever protocol needs to be done and make sure that they have online schooling, that they have access to the teachers or the directors and all those kinds of things. But our goal is hopefully they'll be on site, on a daily basis. We're also affiliated to the recovery organizations, as I mentioned. So we'll have speakers and they'll see people that have been successful in recovery. I've also been raising money with.
Tell me about that real quick, Brian, real quick. I want to hear about the raising money, but tell me about them seeing people that have been successful. That's really important for people to see things like that.
Yeah. So we have a few organizations. I'm not going to name all the different ones, but we have some organizations that even are in Raleigh that focus on college students that are in recovery. and they live at in a special little campus of their own, and they go to school online, or they go to NC State or UNC, but they come back to their facility because, let's face facts, there is a little bit of a stigma, especially in college, about partying and this, that, and the other thing.
A little bit, Brian.
Yeah,
A
well, a
little bit.
lot. And the reality is they need their support. It's getting a lot better in colleges. So there's a lot of support organizations, but we're tying into all
That's
those
great.
we're tying into all the support organizations so they can see what it's like for a successful person. They can also see what it's like for someone that's failed or passed away, with guest speakers, and really give them the sense of reality. Because as we know, when you're young, you feel indestructible. And this will never happen to me. And that's really where everyone's heads go. And it's where every parent and child's head go until it happens to you. And then you wake up and you're in a state of despair and you can't believe it happened. No one ever thinks it's going to happen to them or their family. And everyone I speak with, Joe, and anyone that's listening to this, I guarantee they have at least a friend or a family member or someone they know that has had drug addiction that's gotten through it, or had drug addiction that still hasn't gotten through it, or that someone that's passed away because of an overdose. Everyone. I mean, the stats.
And that's not just, limit that to substance abuse, right? There's other addictions. I think we talked about this before, right? So yeah, I mean, let's not run away from things, and let's have honest conversations, right? So there's something that these children are looking to feel. There's great research that speaks about this. So let's talk to them about their emotions. Let's allow them to feel what it is they're looking for in these escapes. And that just takes the hard conversation, right? So anyway, listen, you talked about the giving that empirical example, bringing people in front of them. That's huge. That's huge. Now, I don't want to get into anything off track, but I think there's a great opportunity, maybe not in the short term, but as you all evolve, to start bringing more of that virtual first. How do you teach these kids to be functioning in that virtual economy first, right? Be
That's
creators.
A great point.
Yeah.
Great point. And I will say we've been raising money from organizations like Providence Construction, which is an offshoot of another large construction company here in Raleigh. The owner of that organization has told me point blank that the construction industry has a huge drug issue, and they like to help their organization, and they've already offered us the ability to, if any of your students are juniors and seniors and they want to come to a work program with us and learn property management, construction, those kinds of things. And that's what I want to put together next beyond raising money, is reach out to corporations that are donating money, or small businesses, and saying, hey, you're a design build company, or are you willing to have a intern from our organization, or you do electrical, or whatever it may be, or and really tying into the organizations here in Raleigh and giving those kids the ability to do some work while they're juniors and seniors in high school, to see what they really want to do. Not meant for college. And college is great. If they want to go to college, they can do that. But a lot of kids that go to college really probably should be looking at what their career should be and take a couple of years to feel it out. And maybe they want to do construction. Maybe they want to be a real estate agent. Maybe they want to, be an electrician or a plumber, or do something with their hands. And, these are great ways to get them in front of the right people to help them do that.
Yeah, you got to expose the youth to, all the different possibilities. You just can't say you can be anything. You got to say you can be anything. Look.
Everyone wants
right?
to help. It's crazy. I mean,
everybody does want to.
I'm so impressed by the community. When I talk to people about this, which has been difficult, but I'm starting to be able to do these kinds of things. Everyone I talk to, friends where I grew up in Rhode Island, will give us special deals on the golf balls for the tournament, or the shirts I'm wearing, right? Those kinds of things. Everyone wants to give us a discount. Everyone wants to help. We have a company coming in today to do free wiring and cabling for our network in the building. They want to do it for free. They want to install cameras for us, for video cams for free. These are great things, and everyone wants to donate and give back. And we really appreciate that kind of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of these business owners are type A's. A lot of type A's end up struggling with addiction. And, I'm not trying to, characterize any of these people or profile, your donors in any way, shape, or form, but it doesn't surprise me that the community is out there and willing, and even people that are tangential to the community, right? Just people in the business community that aren't necessarily on the regular engaged in the recovery community are very willing. If you show up asking for, them to make a donation, they open a checkbook, they start doing whatever. That's
It's
great.
the small businesses and the mid-sized businesses in this country that I've found here in Raleigh that have helped us. And this isn't a ding against the big organizations, but the big corporations and the technology companies that I've worked for many years, for some reason, to get them to donate anything is very, very difficult. And it's a little sad. They donate millions of dollars to causes, but you're going to, until we're up and running for 2 years showing a successful run rate, they're not willing to take the risks. But the small businesses here in Raleigh have been phenomenal. The friends and family program, reaching out to their friends and family, have been phenomenal. And as I said, everyone I talk to that wants to talk to me as they donate, it seems like they have a story about a cousin or an uncle or a brother or a good friend that lost a child. It just seems like there's a lot more of this out here than people know. And I never thought it was the case until it happened to me.
Brian, you use your talents. Everybody wants to help, right? Tell me about some of the other talented people that you've gotten to work with. Like, what have you seen amazing? I think it's amazing that you came in and gave an injection of funds, and I'll say it, $200,000+. And I know it wasn't you alone. It was the network effect and the team effort. Yeah. But like, you came in and you said, hey, that's where I'm going to put my energy, spoke it, believed it, lived it. It happened. Who else has been doing like amazing things like that? Where you're like, holy wow, step back 6 months, 2 years later, and it's like, wow, that's impressive. Anybody else? You don't have to call anybody by name, but like anecdotes of people just doing amazing things with their talents.
Yeah, I've just seen, other people on the board really put the effort in. There's been some individuals on the board that have decided they when I first started to step down, but they always seem to come back, right? We had to go in and paint the building, get this school ready to go. And a lot of the people that had left the board because they had other things they had to focus on, showed up. And when we did our grand opening a week or so back in the ribbon cutting, we had over 75 people in our parking lot show up to the building that day. And I got so many emails and texts and congratulations. And I've only been on the board for a couple of years. Leah Wright started this because of a vision of something that happened to her son. Luckily, her son is in recovery, and her husband Jimmy supported her through a lot of struggles over the first couple of years, because I didn't join this until they were probably 2 years in. And a number of other people, I could name on the board, but it's just been amazing the passion that people have had and the organizations have had to get this together. And there's still a lot of work to be done. And what I'm really happy about is I did forward the ribbon cutting information on WRAL, which is our local news station, to everybody that had already donated. I've had some close friends that, these people, there's no need, they're donating $5,000 out of their personal money, $2,500 out of their personal money, because they've had their struggles. And they've seen the struggles, and they're someone that see what I've gone through. And, people tell me they're amazed by what I'm able to do after my son passed. To me, this is what needs to be done. You got two choices, and there's way more heroes than me that fight, for our country, come back missing a limb. The reality is some of those people go out and teach other people how to get by, or they run marathons with prosthetics. And these are the amazing people. And that's what I looked at to motivate. Like, hey, what would happen if I came home and I had no legs? Would I curl up in a ball, or would I go out and try to be productive? And when I lost my son, I felt like I lost my legs. And I basically said to myself, I got to set an example here for my other two kids. And I want to be one of those people that helps other people from this. I'm going to take the most negative thing in my life and try to spin it into somewhat of a positive. Doesn't mean that I don't hurt on a daily basis, but I'm glad that I'm able to give back. And I'm looking forward to not having to talk necessarily about my son as the billboard of why you should give money. I want to start talking about the success of Wake Monarch and look at all the kids and parents we've helped. That's how I want to raise money, is by the showing people what a recovery high school could do, and also getting to the state of North Carolina once we have the school up and running for a year or so, and getting together with Charlotte and showing the state this is a necessity. Okay. Let's get the kids when they have problems and start them young, and not, just deal with them after they get arrested and thrown in jail. Because that's what's going to happen. They're going to either die or they end up in jail. That's how it works.
The most underrepresented population when it comes to inclusion, let's just say, is the recovery population, is the population of those who suffer from addiction, right? They're the most,
there's a 7 out of
just be
10.
honest.
There's a 7 out of 10 success rate from what I've read in recovery high schools. And there's the exact opposite. There's a 7 out of 10 fallback when kids go right back to the same high school that they got the drugs in the first place. And that's very simple to understand for anyone to know. If you're drugs from their friends in the high school they're in, and then they go to a rehab and come out, why are you going to put them back with those same kids? The problem is, where do you put them? If I don't have the money, where do I send them? If there's no options other than a private school, what do I do with them? So it's a very difficult situation, and we want to not only help the kids, but we want to help the parents that are lost on, what do I do here? What do I do for my kids? When the kids get out of the rehab, that's when the hard part really starts. The parents getting relief because they've been dealing with drugs, and then all of a sudden they're in a rehab or in jail. And there's actually a sense of relief because I've been through it.
Listen,
they're in this place for a month. I don't have to deal with anything. And then all of a sudden you get a call saying, hey, they're out in a week. What's your plan? And then the stress begins, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do for my kid now? They're getting out. It's up to me now. And that's what we want to help those parents with. And if we can't help them, at least have the connections to all the other recovery organizations to give them a network to help these parents, because they don't know what to do. And it's very difficult.
Yeah, I want to have a follow-up conversation with you off recording about community building, right? I was able to help a community of concerned citizens around a issue, get off a Facebook group that was becoming toxic and getting kind of monitored and reported on, into a new situation where they're out of social media, but they're on this platform called Geneva. And it's for communities like Wake Monarch, for like this local advocacy, for all things like that. It's kind of along the lines of Slack. I mean, Slack
Sure.
from being in the business. So I'm introducing, the greater, population to things like Slack and, newer, more open tools that
We can use help on
them.
that.
Yeah. So I'll
Definitely.
share with you what I did. And then Brian, I spent 2 hours in the car with you driving from Boston to Portland. I think it was the first business trip you were on right after your son had passed. And I think there's a story to be told there when you're ready, in terms of, you gave a great little, summary there. You lost your legs. What would you do? And I think you did the right thing. The hard choice for parents, if they do suffer the ultimate loss, is what do you do after that, right? So that's how parents not get there. And I think you're doing an amazing thing, Brian. I love you, man. This is awesome. I applaud you for seeing an opportunity to contribute your ability to generate revenue as a career salesperson and lean it into something that you could have ran away from. right? There's a lot of pain in probably getting involved in this organization. I think you have shared it with me. So
No question. And I appreciate the time, Joe. And yeah, it's still hard sometimes to even go to the meetings. So that brings up a lot of memories. But what I will say is nothing I've learned, in all my years, nothing is really good unless you have to work for it, unfortunately. And it is what it is. And, I'm just happy that I did drive through adversity of joining the group and going to the board meetings, doing all the things that I had to do, which was very difficult because I'm seeing this come to fruition. And over time, my goal is that this becomes operational. They've got all the admin, all the support organizations, and we get some other fresh people into the board that want to continue and look at what my next venture is to help the recovery community, specifically the parents. You hit a really good area that I really do want to help parents, because everyone looks at the person in recovery, but the people that are really struggling as much as anyone is the people that don't know how to deal with it, that just there's not as many resources as you would think out there for parents. It's just really very difficult.
Well, it's 2021. The resources can be created in an instant. And I think that's, the miracle we live in. I think it's a great opportunity to introduce, the kids in your school eventually, right? When you start getting a little bit more nuance with the curriculum. But no, your point, listen, my message here is, Brian's effort here, take advantage of it because the resources are there. Brian's one of them. He can introduce you to a network in North Carolina, and from there, open you up to a network across the world. And Brian, I have a sneaking suspicion that big things are coming in the not too distant future for the efforts you have underway at Wake Monarch, and all the big plans in terms of formalizing under the state and expanding bigger networks post school life, and how we get other businesses involved in that. I see hockey stick impact for y'all. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing the story with us.
Thank you, Doug.
That was fun, dude. You're the man.
I got a fucking old man today.